Hey Board Game Crusaders, glad to have you back. So today we'll be going over Small World Underground. Incidentally, it plays just like Small World with a couple of things added to the Underground version, such as, well, characters and volcanoes, and there's some special room and special items that are in this one that weren't in the original. But aside from those little differences, the base game is still the same, and this can actually be played with Small World. I won't be covering those rules, but let's get into it. The components in this game are pretty easy to follow, pretty straightforward things. We have the volcano, which is only utilized by a specific faction. We have the mountains, which will go on the game board. We have the turn order marker, also going on the game board. We have the different factions indicated by their faction symbol. We have the monsters indicated by the little target symbol there, or the crosshairs. And there are the victory points in all of those different values. There's the dice, which has 3 blank sides, and then a 1, 2, and 3 side pip. There's the special rooms, indicated by the pillars. There's the special items, indicated by the pouch. There are the special powers, which are these kind of puzzle piece looking things, and then there's the races, which is the other puzzle piece. Those are going to go together to form a faction randomly. Now, looking at this, I'm not really going to cover too much detail on what all these symbols mean because they vary from race to race. The only thing that's constant is this, which we are going to go over in the actual game. But you're going to want to reference one of the 5 different cheat sheets here. There's the special powers and what the relics and the places do. And then there's what all the races do. And looking at that, I realize I may have misspoke. I said these were items. They're relics, technically. So take it for what it's worth. We're going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone while going over the map. We're going to go over the map and then the setup of the map so that we'll be ready to rock with gameplay. So the map has several different sections. These ones are the volcano sections. They are not crossable except by specific factions that give the ability. Those relate to the lakes and oceans in the base game, which are not passable except for certain factions. In this one, the river is passable, but we'll go over that now. Why not now? So, well, because it won't make sense yet. We'll go over that in a second when we go over movement and so forth. So the red outlined volcanic places cannot be crossed except for specific abilities that let you bend the rules, which each faction and each special power give you abilities to bend the rules. That's where the strategy comes in, is picking which ones you're going to use and how you're going to bend the rules. But on the map, we have the mushroom forests. We have the black mountains, which are the skulls and these other ones. We have the rivers, naturally. We have the mystic crystals. We have the mud pools. And we have the mining areas. Now in the base game there's going to be forests and fields and mountains and farms. But in this game it's underground and it's a little darker. You're going to want to take the first player token, or not the first player, the turn marker, and put it on the number 1 spot. You're going to want to take some of the dark mountains and place them on the dark mountain areas. Then you're going to want to place 2 of the monster tokens indicated by the crosshairs on the places on the map that have crosshairs. So just to make sure we get a good focused look here, we have this crosshair symbol, which isn't focused, but it's working on it. There we go, that crosshair symbol. You're also going to see it on the map. Let's just go into that just to make sure that it's precise and clear. This right here. So anywhere you see those little bad boys, you will want to place 2 monsters. Just like that. And on this map, there happens to be 4 places where you place monsters. So that's where these room and relic icons come into play. You kind of mix those up. You draw 1 for each monster area. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Put the rest in the box. Keep these in a central location where you can draw from them. Anytime that you defeat a realm with monsters, the monsters get removed from the board and replaced by a face-up item or room token. And now we'll leave that to the cheat sheet to go over what those all do, just like we will with the factions. I'm not going to cover any of those abilities, just the basic gameplay here. So that's how we set the board up, and with that, we're ready to begin on the turns. So continuing setup, and then moving on to the turns. Each player is going to get 5 singles for their victory point total, just to start the game out. You're going to randomize these. Usually that's really fun to do because the backs also have indications of which factions, and the special ability cards don't. So they'll be easy to randomize. You just kind of, some of them do, I guess, depending on if they have anything that happens when they go into decline. We'll go over that later though. So you randomize these and you place out 5 of those randomly. Maybe that's a good way to do it random because you don't see what you're drawing if they're from the middle. And then same thing here, 5 of these. Come on, drop, 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 drop. There we go. And then you just kind of place these together, forming the complete factions you're choosing from. Now, the beginning of the turn, the beginning of the first turn specifically, you get to choose your faction, starting with the first player. First player is the person who's most recently visited a cellar or a cave, according to the rules. And the first person picks which faction they'd like to utilize. If you pick the top faction at any time, it is free. You take the top faction away, push everything up, and then replace the drawn faction at the bottom. Now, if you don't like the top faction, maybe that's a really bad strategy for you. You don't like the abilities that these guys give. Again, this will give you something to break the rules. This will give you something else to break the rules. Sometimes they'll help you score extra points. Sometimes they'll let you travel in regions that you wouldn't otherwise be able to travel. Sometimes they'll give you combat bonus. Sometimes they'll give you bonuses when the race goes into decline. And we'll cover decline, obviously, later. So, if you don't like the wise shadow mimes, then you can pay a coin to skip past the wise shadow mimes. And if you don't want the iron dwarves, or the whatever that faction is, you place a coin. And then I definitely like the flocking leeches, or liches, excuse me. So I'll take the flocking liches. I don't have to pay for that because I paid for the ones that I was skipping. Now again, those move up, a new faction comes in the bottom. So that was choosing my faction. Now say nobody likes the wise shadow mimes. They're always skipped over. So let's say the next person skips over the wise shadow mimes, picks the iron dwarves. When you pick a faction with money next to it, you also get the money, or the victory points. And that continues the pattern just like normal. Let's say the next time someone picks, they want to pick these thieving cultists. So you pay a coin to skip. I think you get the picture here. But as you can see, these wise shadow mimes, even though nobody really wants them, there may come a point where they have enough money on them that they're worth the while, and then somebody may decide to get them, which is a good mechanic for weaker races getting picked. When the factions move up, their coins move up with them. That is how you pick a faction. So anytime I say, and then you pick a faction, that's what you need to know to do that. Now it's my turn. I just picked my faction, the Vanishing Flames. That's where these numbers come into play, circled in the orange or yellow, whatever color they are. If you're colorblind or not, I don't know. So on each side, what you do is you take the number from your special power, the number for your race, add it together, in this case 9. So what I do is I grab all of my tokens for the flaming race, indicated by, well, that little thing there, or the picture, whatever floats your boat. And I pick 9 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wow, that was pretty good. That's the maximum I can use per turn. So I've picked out my faction and my chips are all counted. Now let's show how to move the game. Again, we're ignoring special abilities. These flame guys are the ones that can typically go through the volcanic areas, or at least start in one. So reference the rules for that. I'm just going to go over basic mechanics here, which are, when you're first starting, unless again your faction says otherwise, you can start on any of the border regions which are unoccupied by an enemy. What that means, when you're trying to take over an empty region, you play 1 token for the region, 1 token to take it over. That's kind of why these come in handy being counted out, and these come in handy being on the board. Because I take that region, and then I take this region with 2, and then let's say I want to take this mountain region. So it's not empty, it's got a token in it already. So I play 1 for the region, excuse me, 1 for the mountain, and then 1 to control it. So if I were to go, instead of the mountain region, say I wanted to attack these mad cows, I would pay 1 for the region, 1 to control it, then for each of the tokens to take over that. So then these would leave the board. Again, this would enter fray, and then I would have 1 token left, and 1 token is not enough to take anything. So, and this is where the handy dandy dice comes into play. Essentially, you place your token in the region you want to contest, you roll your dice. I got a 2. That's good. That means this counts as though it was my unit plus 2 more, which isn't always going to be successful. If I had rolled a 0, I wouldn't have been able to do anything, and it comes to my deployment phase. But I did roll a 2, which means I pretty much get to control that and pretend like I had enough to do it. Now if I didn't have enough and I did roll the 0, let's go back to that example. What I would do is I would take this in my hand. And then when it comes to redeployment phase, I take all of my troops, except for 1 on each square, and then I deploy these said troops to defend myself however I'd like, so that when an enemy is trying to attack me, they have to get through more of my troops, because it works similarly as when attacking monsters. You have 2 for the base, and then 1 for every unit in there. And so I'm just going to level out my defenses and put 3 in each one, and so that I've got a pretty solid defense set up if anybody tries to be so foolish and take me on. Then you calculate your victory points. Again, at this point there are abilities that say maybe if you've got a crystal field you get double victory points. We're ignoring those rules right now, just going on with the base. So I have 1, 2, 3 areas which are under my control, which grants me 3 victory points, which then I can save, of course, for victory, or I can spend if I need a stronger race down the line. So let's move on to the next player's turn. They have selected their faction, and they are now moving in to attack me. Let's just pretend they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's just say they have 8. I'm not going to really do anything realistic there. We're just going to say they have a faction with 8 people. They can either start over here if they want and be uncontested pretty much until I get over there, or they can start over here. If they do choose to start over here, same rule applies. It has to be on a border square. They can start attacking here if they wanted to, even though it's occupied. They just have a lot more to get into. So I'm not going to do that. It seems pretty difficult. I'm going to start out here because that gives me that solid victory point. And then I'm going to attack into here because they've got that sword. Maybe I want the sword. I don't know. Maybe I should have just started there. Who knows? So I'm going to attack into here. I'm going to place 1 for the area, 1 for the victory, and then 1, 2, 3 for defeating the enemy. Now the enemy, for every square that is conquered, they take however many units are there, They take one, put it back in the box. It's been destroyed. The other two remain in their hand. Now I only have one more token, not enough to do much damage as you saw earlier. I can kind of play my luck here, try it here, roll the dice, nothing. So this goes to my hand. I do the thing here where I redeploy, and oh look at that, I'm going to put 2 here, and then I have 2 extra, so I'll just level them out like that. And then I get 2 victory points with just the base rules. Now we move to this player's redeployment. In a 2-player game, this isn't really that practical. You don't really need to redeploy because you're just going to gather your units and do your stuff. But if we were playing more than 2 players, now the player that was defeated can take his remaining units and dish them out in other controlled areas they have. If they don't have controlled areas, the units just stay in their hand. But at the beginning of the next player's turn, they take all of the units, except for 1 again, and redeploy following the same method. I'm going to show you the river movement and how that works, since we have a chance now. So, river movement, you don't have to place 2 in to occupy, you just place 1. And then you can move through and place 2 to capture other units. And then go on with your turn. Oh, nothing, so that's here. We're going to redeploy. I don't really have anything to contest over here, so I'm going to put them all here. Now here's where the river comes into play. You cannot control the river unless you've got an ability or a faction that lets you do that. So, you would then take him up in your redeployment phase as well. Now on your second turn, I didn't really mention this, I kind of breezed by it, I thought it was common sense, but let's just point out that on your second turn, you can't start on any border tile unless your troops were all eliminated last time. Anytime you don't have troops on the board, you default to the outer ring when you're starting. But if you have troops on the board, you have to start somewhere adjacent to where you already control. So this turn rounds out, I add 4 to my count. Then the spiders do their thing. And the game continues that way. At the beginning, oh, that's another thing I neglected, I'm so sorry. So when the first player begins their turn, aside from the first turn, so second turn on, the first player will move this counter down. So the second time the flames moved, before they crossed the river, before they did any of that, they should have moved the counter down. Once it gets to 10, everyone takes 1 more turn, and then the game's over. Highest point value wins the game. Now let's talk about going into decline. Let's say it's the Flamers' turn again, and they are kind of stretched out. They're all over the board here. They've got all these regions controlled, but all they have left is 3. That's not really enough to do anything anymore. You can maybe take 1 more region and risk your luck, or you can do something that's more contested with the 3. Because even if it's more than 1, say I want to attack into here. So I need 1 for each troop, I need 1 for the empty space, I need 1 more for the victory. I can still roll the dice if that's my last. Oh, well, look at that, I would have made it. So let me just clarify. You don't have to have 1 unit down in order to roll the dice. If it's your last deployment and you need the support, you can roll the dice. Sorry, out of order, but it's important, you need to know that too. So let's just say that everything is kind of maxed out there. You don't really want to use these other tokens, there's not much use for them. What you do is you announce you're putting your race in decline. You basically remove all but 1 character and then flip them over. Then you pick another race or another faction using those rules I went over at the beginning. Now these factions that are in decline are still scoring you points, as well as whatever you're doing with your new faction. But the turn that you put your faction in decline, you do not do anything else except pick your race. So you pick your race, and then tally your points for everywhere you've got the decline. The game passes, play passes to the next person. Now on your next turn, on anybody's turn, they can attack the race that's in decline, and it's just as simple as 1 extra token. So that would take 1 plus the victory plus the token, and you'd take it. You can attack your own declined units if you need to. Maybe you're getting ready to put your second faction in decline. You can only have 1 faction in decline at a time. So maybe you want to take out some of those spots because they're still easy pickings, if they're even available anymore, because decline factions go pretty quick, I find. But let's just say that you were setting another faction in decline as soon as you set your other faction in decline, your first faction that's in decline gets removed from the game, and you put your second faction in decline and your turn, and so on and so forth. You can put any faction into decline at any time, but it does forfeit that turn. When you put a faction in decline, all you do is you take the faction card and the ability card, you flip them over to indicate they're in decline, and so that you can keep track of who's got what in decline. And that is the game. Very straightforward, very fast paced, very fun to play.